Welcome to episode 87 of the Wilderness Locals podcast. On this episode, we sit down with a good friend of ours, Tyler Freel. Tyler's a bear hunter, an Alaskan, a podcaster, and just an all-around good dude. In this episode, we talk about all things bears, bear hunting, bear baiting, and just shoot the shit.
This episode is brought to you by Kifaru International, the toughest hunting gear on the planet. Right now, Kifaru's just launched 2 new packs and a fishing rig and all kinds of stuff, so head over there and check it out, kifaru.net. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Just Shooting Arrows, BC's premier archery shop.
Whole thing by myself. You tell me to talk about bears, sign me in and see you later.
Yeah. So Tyler usually sets them up, and then I come in and just talk, but I'm trying to figure this out. So I'm trying to text Tyler, and he's like driving to his goat spot right now. So
Gotcha.
It's turning into a fucking train wreck here, but I got it.
Nice.
I get my wife. Yeah. So a COVID survivor. We're both COVID survivors.
Yep. Veterans now. Actually, I'm kind of relieved. I'm relieved that I got it. I mean, it wasn't fun, for me personally, like our family. I've been a lot sicker than I was there, but I feel like Superman now.
Did it kick the shit out of you like it did me, or what?
For about a day. Like, it had me laid up pretty good for about a day, and then after that, I still felt sick for several days, but I was improving. I had a fever and just didn't feel like moving, like even to get up and go take a piss for a day. But no, I mean, I'm pretty lucky. I didn't have any trouble breathing or nothing like that. I just felt like shit.
Yeah, me neither. I was, it just kicked the shit out of me for a couple days, coughing and stuff. But other than that, I wasn't bad. So I know. Nice. It really kicked
Now you can go to the work camp for the commandant or whatever he is now, right? I don't know what you guys got going on down there, but
it's a fucking train wreck is what it is. It's just like worldwide media right now. But yeah, he's I don't know what he is. He's trying to be a dictator of some kind, I think.
Yeah, I'm just glad I live in a spot where I can go crawl off in the woods and go kill stuff and have fun and kind of forget about stuff like that temporarily.
Yeah, it's a fucking disaster, and it does. I don't know. They're arresting all them guys in Ottawa tonight. It looks like so.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
All the truckers. So we'll see where that goes, I guess. But I don't know. Yeah, I like to just try and avoid all that shit too, if I can.
Yeah, no kidding there. It's as much as anything, it just keeps me from going down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, man, because I could put on my tinfoil hat and go with the best of them. At least that's my impulse. I try to resist it, but
I was listening to your pod today about I can't remember 10 millimeter pod. You were talking about shooting that 6.8 Western.
Yeah.
What grain of bullet are you using out of that? Because I'm a big 270 guy, and that's pretty much what it is, isn't it? It's just it's necked up.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's I've been shooting, my favorite load's the 175 grain tipped Match Kings, the Sierras. And really it's kind of, that cartridge is kind of like a 270 short mag that's tighter twisted to shoot a 175. Because I think Nosler came out with like the 160 grain AccuBond for their 27 Nosler. But like most 270 short mags aren't twisted tight enough to stabilize it. And then Sierra came out with this 175 match or tipped Game King. And yeah, I mean, it's not magic or nothing, but it's a pretty cool cartridge. It's pretty soft, it doesn't recoil that much. I mean, recoil don't bother me, but it's a nice cartridge to shoot. Seems to be pretty accurate, and yeah, I think it has its place.
The so you're loading for it then, obviously, or are they making ammo for that?
I pretty much just got factory stuff for it right now, but yeah, eventually if I stick with one, I'll start hand loading for it.
Yeah, I always have conversations with buddies about this because, like you got the guys that are the 30 cal guys, and I've been actually looking at a 7mm Rem mag, and but I've been shooting a 270 forever. It's a nice gun to shoot, right? It doesn't kick too bad. It is they shoot 130 grain bullet, and I've shot moose with that gun, so. I don't know.
There's nothing wrong with the 270.
Yeah, I don't know at the end. I think sometimes we overthink calibers a little bit much. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a balance. Like you can easily overthink it. There's stuff that Grandpa was doing with his 270 or 30-06 or 303 or whatever. That to a point. I try to balance it between, looking at it realistically, like. Yeah, do you really need it? But I also like guns and I like new stuff and seeing even like small incremental little developments, like you read old magazines and shit. And a lot of the cartridges we have today are like the result of incremental gains. Yep. It's not like a development of smokeless powder type thing for every cartridge or whatever. But, I think you just got to be balanced. You got to know that there's no cartridge going to come out that's going to do, be magic and do everything without you having to do your part. But I also appreciate like kind of new cool things and just kind of try to take them for what they're worth,
Like a lot of people don't realize like the 270, 30-06, these cartridges are like almost 100 years old. And they've been around, and like a 30-06 is a pretty versatile cartridge. I think that's what Alaska's Wolfman was shooting, was a 30-06, and he shot a pile of grizzly and shit with that gun.
Yeah, he shot a lot of stuff, man. I think he started out the rifle he brought to Alaska was a 30-06, and then he talked about market hunting with 250 3000 Savage, which is like not quite as hot as 25-06, and then like the 220 Swift was his favorite. Seemed to be his favorite rifle basically for anything but grizzly bears. Like he's shot all sort of moose. Yeah, he claimed that a 220 Swift, even with the shitty little bullets they had back then, killed any hoofed game quicker than any other rifle he owned. And he was into the money pretty good for a while, trapping fox, like when money was good for it and he could afford to he bought every new rifle that came out at the time, so he was into that stuff too. So it's, looking at it with context and all that stuff, it's, I don't know. It's easy.
That's the only book I've ever read, and that is not a lie. It was Alaska's Wolfman. My cousin hands me this book. He's a big wolf hunter. He's like, you got to read this fucking book. So he gave me his copy, and I read it. And what was his name again?
Frank Glazer or Glazer. Yeah. I don't know exactly. I think it was pronounced Glazer, but Glaser.
Yeah. So, man, he's got some good stories in there, like how he started breeding them wolves to his sled dogs, and then he could have a hardier sled dog and just shit like that. Like how he would take a stick, he'd take a stick and snap them wolves over the nose when they were in them footholds. Then he could tie them up, and then he threw them over his shoulder and carried them back to his cabin, like just shit like that.
Yeah. I can't remember if he had knocked that one out, or because I mean that's like a good way to dispatch fox too. You'll just knock them on the nose and then compress their chest, whatever. But he either did that or choked it down, I can't remember, and stuffed it in a burlap sack and tied it on his backpack and packed it down. And he had got that idea to breed wolf dogs from years before. When he owned the Black Rapids Lodge, he was there, and just two big old huge sled dogs showed up one day. He didn't know where they came from, and they ended up spending the winter with him and being really good sled dogs. And then he took them. They came with him one day in the springtime. He was after this giant, the biggest grizzly he'd ever seen, supposedly, and went up this box canyon. And they ended up cornering this grizzly bear, and them dogs took off after it. And he thought they were going to get eaten, but he could tell. He became apparent they were used to chasing bears and fighting bears, and it turned out that they were from a dog team a guy had bought in Canada when he was in there trying to, I don't know if it was, oil production or gold or whatever, but had bought that was from, I don't know if it was Nunavut or where, Victoria Land or whatever they called it back in the day, but they were like Eskimo polar bear dogs. That the guy had bought this dog team and brought him to Alaska, and these two got loose, and that's what gave Frank Glazer the idea to breed wolf dogs, because he was just impressed with how powerful they were and smart, and he freaking caught himself a wolf and bred it to his Malamutes, and had legendary dogs at this point.
And he walked. What another crazy part about that book is he walked everywhere. Like he'd walk to. Oh yeah. He'd walk 100 miles or more. Like he'd just walk. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, some of those places. Like I've been a lot of those in a lot of that country that he's talking about. Oh, I walked from here to here. I'm like, man, that would kill me. And he just did it like. Following the 40-mile caribou herd just with whatever shit he could carry on his back for over a month. Had a pot to boil grayling in, and when it started getting too cold at night, he shot 3 like young, yearling caribou, brain tanned their hides, and sewed up a freaking sleeping bag. And he had the sleeping bag for years, he said.
Yeah, it's a good book if anybody wants to get it.
Oh yeah. But that's probably my favorite book. So if you're going to read one book, that's the one to read.
Yeah, I don't read. I just buy magazines and look at pictures.
Do you color or you like crayons?
I can't keep it inside the lines though. That's my problem.
That's the trick, man. You need a little bit more whiskey or something.
But this podcast, I've been getting a lot of questions about bear hunting, bear baiting, where to set up bear baits, what you're baiting with, and all that shit. So I thought it's something we could dive into. You're the only other guy, like I know guys in Canada that bait, but you're the only Alaska guy I know that baits grizzlies and black bears. So I thought you'd give me your 2 cents on what you got going on.
I can definitely do my best.
Just start with how you look for a bait and what you look for to find like a location to set up a new bait.
Yeah. I think location for setting up a bait is huge, and there's a lot, there's always going to be a learning curve that goes into it, but there are some things you can definitely look for, and it's a matter of trial and error sometimes. Some baits, I've set baits in spots that I was sure, I had no doubt that there was going to be bears all over it and they'd never get touched. And then sometimes you put a bait in a spot that's a little more suspect, you're kind of skeptical of, and there's bears all over it. There's kind of a wild card there. You never know really what to expect, but there's definitely more to it than, anybody that I've ever heard knock baiting has never gone and has pretty much literally anybody I've heard that's knocked baiting has never gone and tried to do it themselves. It's just not, there's kind of a craft to it, if you want to put it like that. But anyway, as far as looking for bait sites, the biggest key, it's kind of obvious, but you want your bait in a spot where bears will find it. And what that means to me is you paying attention to the prevailing wind wherever you're at. You could look up weather data and just, know the prevailing wind direction. And then Depending on the country you're in, there's different things I look for, like up here in Alaska, a lot of rivers are kind of pathways for critters. Like, so a huge percentage of the animals are within, a few miles of these river systems, and, big and small, they're just travelways. Almost every creek or river has game trails alongside it. So that's one way, and you can get into a whole theory and method for picking spots on rivers, taking into account you could say creeks, any waterway or like really, conducive pathway or travel way for bears, keeping in mind the prevailing wind. You want to look at the lay of the land. Like on a river, I'll try to look for outside bends, sometimes on Google Earth or their map or whatever. You look for outside bends of a river where anything that's coming up or downstream has to, that's the spot they're going to be closest to the river. If you put them on, like a peninsula or inside bend of the river, a lot of times critters or bears are going to walk by it, even if they're a couple hundred yards away. And unless the wind's blowing the right way, they won't smell it, and they may not be as comfortable coming into that. Basically, I look for, man, I feel like an idiot because I'm trying to be a little, maybe too specific in some ways, but know the prevailing wind. And if you could, set your bait so that you're upwind of the prevailing wind of wherever you think these bears are going to be moving. Sometimes it's on rivers, it'd be, like the outside bend. And if you can pick like the farthest outside bend within a good distance of there, then there's a good chance that almost all the game is going to be funneling like right by that point coming up or down river. And it does take some trial and error to see, but you can kind of figure out. And in areas where there's not like a waterway, like at least the part of Alberta I was in by Valley View, it just seemed like a lot of rolling bush country. And some of that can be trial and error too, figuring out where bears move. But, typically like bigger valleys and drainages and draws, like we'll have more animals moving through them. So, if you're like setting up just in a big patch of bush, or you have a big patch of bush that you're looking at hunting, sometimes one spot may be as good as another, and you just got to try different spots. If there's a lot of, cleared country or stuff, black bears in particular tend to like real thick country places. They feel safe. They can move around and not be out in the open. And, you wouldn't want to say, set your bait a little ways into a patch of bush, that's next to huge cleared areas. If the prevailing wind is blowing back towards the cleared areas, wherever you're setting it, you want that prevailing wind blowing towards where the bears, where you expect the bears to be. I mean, am I like way dumbing that down to like making no, way too much out of that simple fact?
No, I think, I agree 100%. Like the last bait that I had set up, I run that bait for about 10 or 11 years. And when I set it up, there was a big clearing on my downwind side, and the bears never, ever wanted to set foot in that clearing. So, but between me and that clearing was about 20 yards. Like I was on the edge of it. So when them big boars would go to circle me, I had them, like I had a lane cleared downwind. I was in a spruce tree, a real limby spruce tree, and they never wanted to climb that tree, which was nice because I could keep a stand up there and they never eat it on me. But I was between me and that clearing, and then they never want to go and expose themselves, especially them old boars. And then I think I shot two big black bears just like that, them cruising downwind, trying to wind you because they know you're there. They're it's just whether or not you,
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's a good point because there's also another level of once you find like a general place or area to put a bait, there's strategy in how you can set that up too. You know, like you said, generally those black bears, they, especially big ones, won't want to come out into the open even if they're trying to wind you. And setting, you know, paying attention to the prevailing wind when you set up your bait, like where you anticipate putting if you're going to build a tree stand or where you're going to set your tree stands. You know, you want it to where the prevailing wind is generally blowing away. And ideally, if you have some kind of barrier, like, you know, a couple of my baits, or I like setting them where I have not very much ground behind me to a river or a clearing like that, where they're not going to want to circle around. And if they do, I'm going to know they're there. Mm-hmm. Areas that get hunted, that get a lot of pressure and hunted hard, you know, like there's here around Fairbanks, there's so many bear baits. It's pretty mind blowing, but there's still bears. And some of these older bears, I know they do it because I've seen them do it. You know, if there's other baits in the area, they'll when they go to a bait, they'll do a big wide circle downwind. And if they smell you're there, they think you're there, they'll just go somewhere else. You'll get pictures of bears all the time, but you know, you'll never see one when you sit sometimes. So there can be some gamesmanship and strategy that you have to adapt depending on the area you're in. Some areas it seems like most of the bears don't really care, or if they aren't ever pressured by people or know what people are, you know, it can get a little interesting, but, you know,
I would almost kind of class some old black bear boars up there with some of them grizzlies. 'Cause the way you talk about how cagey the grizzlies are with the bait.
Yeah.
Like some of them old black bear boars, man, they're almost hard to kill as a whitetail off a bait.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Especially, you know, if they've had some run-ins with people, and I think it's just their nature. You know, they don't get old by being stupid and putting themselves in situations they're not sure of. You know, it's fun too because you never really know what's going to happen, and sometimes those big bears will get aggressive, or, you know, if it's in a rut, like they'll do stuff you don't expect them to sometimes, but generally it's pretty challenging. You've got to really be patient and play your cards right and have some strategy to it. With grizzly bears, you know, I used to not even hunt if the wind was wrong, because I've learned that it was a waste of time. I would hear bears, but then I'd end up spooking them and you'd never see them again. And yeah, I'd say some, especially some, you know, at least probably 50% of the big black bears are probably very, very spooky like that. You know, a lot of them you get pictures of, but you never see them in person.
I had a big boar one time and he winded me right out of the gate, like my first sit. And the wind was like, it's one of them times I shouldn't have sat, you know, but I thought I could get away with it. And he winded me right out of the gate. And then after that, I knew the game was on, right? Like he wasn't coming in if he heard, like, cause I would I'd quad up, fill the bait, and then go park the quad and then go sit. And then as soon as I would leave, the quad would leave. Like 10 minutes later, he'd come out and feed. So this went on like 4 or 5 times. Finally, I brought my side-by-side and I said to my dad, my old man, I'm like, you come with me. You go down, retop the bait. I'll climb in the tree and you'll leave. But keep going. And I said, put her in low gear so you can really hear you leave. So I said, put that fucking rhino in low gear so he can hear you leaving. And my dad revved the shit out of her all the way out. 10 minutes later, I shot that bear and he was just over 20 inches. So it was.
There was one. I mean, there's several. Call it the old switcheroo. I mean, I can't even take credit for it. My uncle. I mean, I must have been little. This was back when you could still bait bears down in Colorado, when, you know, where I was born. And my uncle killed a huge black bear that I think had a musket ball and he'd been shot 2 or 3 times with various shit, but killed him on a bait that he had to do the same type of thing. He had to go in there, make a bunch of noise, leave, and then just sneak back in and kill the thing, you know, on the bait. But yeah, we've done that. We've done that before. And had it work. You know, if you get bears that are coming in right after you leave, you know, they're on. Yeah. They might be smart, but they can't count.
Yeah, they're on to you, man. I know guys that have chased bears, like the same bear for 10 years. They never could kill him on the bait. Like so people that knock bait and say it's, like shooting fish in a barrel, it isn't. It's if you want to just shoot a bear, you probably can do that in the first couple sits. No problem. But if you want to kill a good boar, it's different, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's even being generous too, because that's talking you or me, on baits that are established. When you start talking about trying to establish new baits or being new at it, like it's a challenge, it takes some time and effort and trial and error to really figure out stuff. If I had unlimited time and run around, there's all sorts of spots I'd like to try. Like we can only have two bait stations per person, basically. Some guys will cheat it and some guys' wives do hunt too, but some guys will cheat it and have their wife get two and they'll have two and that's fine, whatever. That's the way the system works. But some areas, ideally, if you can, it'd be nice to do small baits. Like my dad will do this, just with, if he doesn't have baits that he's using currently, he'll do like prospecting with like a 5-gallon bucket full of bait and a stink bait and put it in a spot and give it 3 weeks or 2 weeks. If it gets hit, he'll put more bait there and hunt it. If it doesn't, he'll pull it all and try somewhere else, just to kind of experiment and find, because that's how you end up finding some of these honey holes, is by trying it and failing and trying it again.
There's a local guy here where I live. The guy's killed some fucking slammer boars, like a couple 21s and a 22, I think. And what he does is he'll have his bait, normal bait that he hunts, but he'll go around to real remote spots.
Yeah.
And he'll just hang a camera and a beaver. He'll just literally nail a beaver to a tree or whatever he puts out for bait. And he'll just leave it. He'll leave them. He'll put out whatever in new areas. And if there's a slammer boar shows up, he'll move in there next year, the next spring, and he'll spud a bait there and try and get on that bear. And he's killed some giant bears, and that's his tactic. So it works. But, and like, so for you, a lot of people, you're baiting from a riverboat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're off the river pretty much, and like I'll bait off a quad. So
yeah,
but when I'm off the quad, I'm trying to get to the river anyway. That's where I want to run the bait.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, it all just depends on like where you're at and the tools you have to access. I mean, honestly, the biggest black bear I will ever kill in my entire life, I killed when I was 18. Like a little over a quarter mile off a main highway, in a spot that was, not to say it was, you wouldn't expect there to be bears there, but you wouldn't expect that bear to be there. And it took me a lot of years to appreciate what I had with that bear. He was 20 and 15/16 and squared right at 8 foot at the time is what we squared him at. That's kind of subjective, obviously, but it was a huge fucking bear. And still, I will never kill another interior black bear that big again. I mean, it was just a freak. And so you never really know. And that was, I wasn't even using the quad. I was packing my bait in for my, for my truck.
Yeah.
So, you can't, if you're willing to work and you're willing to, there's a lot of spot, and part of the strategy in finding a bait, especially if there's other people around, if people are hammering areas with riverboats or quads, look for spots that are kind of the in-betweens, maybe that if you're willing to walk a mile, pack bait a mile, it may suck to pack bait a mile, but you may be able to find spots that no one's even touching, because it's too hard for the people who are lazy, and it's too easy for people that have maybe more capable equipment than you are going to go a lot farther, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, like you said, it's if you want to put the work in, and it's a lot of work, even with equipment, like if you got quads and shit. But so there is a lot of guys that are baiting around you then, hey?
Not too many. And my baits, one of them has been my uncle baited it since the mid 90s, so I've been baiting it since I was 16. And, that bait's well established. And that's probably the only reason I keep baiting there, because there are other people, there's some competition around, and people come and go. And it's just such an established bait that I don't want to give it up. And so I bait that every year. And another spot there's a handful of other guys that hunt in the general area, but I pretty much keep in touch with them, and we, coordinate and stay out of each other's hair and tell each other what's going on. And so there is definitely pressure where I hunt. We try to using, my dad's permits and buddy's permits. We try to kind of, as a group, go on some remote hunts every year when we can. And the last time I got to go was 2 years ago, and we got into a pile of them there. It was bonkers. We killed, and we were I was kind of hunting them like I was angry at them. I think we killed 12 bears in basically 2 nights, 5 of us.
I seen your dad was shooting them right in the melon there with his 45-70.
Oh yeah, he said I did. He said I didn't like the way he looked at me. It's a pile of fun, and especially when you get in an area. It's not normal to get in an area like that, and even in some of those areas that's still not normal. But when you have that time when it's just infested with bears, and you could shoot 10 bears off of one bait, and if you kept enough bait there, in 2 weeks there's going to be 10 more or 15 more bears just lurking around. One of those baits we shot 5 off of in 2 days, and 4 of them were big boars.
That's crazy.
just nuts, but that's not normal. That's like you get a little caught up in the moment and trigger happy and start thinking how much work you want to generate for yourself. But
it's like, the thing I really love about bear hunting, man, it's no pressure. It's a fun thing. It's something you can take kids, or, if a kid wants to shoot a bear off a bait, that's a good first animal. So like, I like it. It's no pressure. It's a fun hunt. Just a little bit of work, right? But so you kind of mentioned too, and I wanted to bring this up too. So when you're establishing a bait in an area for the first year, for me, it usually sucks. Like first year baits, I've never had a whole bunch of luck on. Do you kind of find the same?
Yeah, I'd say, I find pretty much the same thing. I've killed bears on baits the first year, but I wouldn't expect it to be like a honey hole, and it's part of the patience game with baiting. Baiting is all about patience and persistence and trying different stuff. It just takes time to develop baits and get bears, and sometimes you may try a spot for a couple of years and it doesn't ever develop into anything special. But it's part of the fun of it. You never really know. If I'm putting a bait out for the first time, generally, I won't even check it for 2 weeks. I'll go, or maybe check it once a week, but I don't even expect anything to find it for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And usually first year, you may get a couple bears on it. You may get a bear you want to shoot on it right off the bat. You never know, but it's usually pretty slow and just take some time for bears to establish it. And if you get a good bait, a bait in a location that bears around are going to find it, the more time you get into that, the more used to using it, the bears are going to get. And bears remember some of that stuff too. And we've gone into baits before that are established in, early May, whatever, to, you're hauling in their bait to set the bait, and there's already bear tracks. I mean, shit, even, which kind of surprised me. One of my bait, that's mainly a grizzly bait. I went in there 2 or 3 years ago to set the bait, and I was like, shit, man, it looks like a grizzly bear has been clawing at the ground here already. I mean, there hadn't been any food or scent there since into the last season. And, and we actually had spooked that thing off the bait because it started, we started talking and it crashed off through the timber. I mean, I'm assuming that's what it was, but because all of the sign was real fresh. But yeah, like bears remember, and they remember spots, even if the grizzly bears I'm hunting usually are traveling. You don't get them for more than a few days at a time, typically. And you'll still see the same bears. Like they'll still travel through. They may be there just for a day, a night, or 2 nights, but they remember these spots to check out every year because they're hungry as shit. There's not a lot of food right after the snow melts.
Yeah, and I swear, like, even if you get an established bait and you run it hard every spring, I think a lot of them bears will even den up not too far away because they want to come back. They remember that, right? If there's going to be food right there at springtime. And actually, the biggest bear I ever killed, man, was he was early. Like, it wasn't even May yet. It was the end of April. And that bear was 20-3, and he just showed up.
Wow.
And I killed him. I went in.
Wow.
I went in to check the bait. I don't use a cell cam, but I just pulled the card, checked it, seen he was there, burned back out, grabbed my bow, and went back in. So, that's kind of how it happens sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that. Usually early on, so a lot of times the first bear that gets on the bait in the spring will be a big boar. It seems like some of those big boars are moving early in the spring, and then you might not see them, and then you might see them again during the rut. I like using sow and heat. These silver bullets got me burping, but I like using sow and heat stuff, especially later in the spring. But yeah, grizzlies too. I mean, and grizzlies are a different animal, totally different animal than black bears in some ways. But I mean, one of the biggest grizzlies, I should have killed him with a stone arrow point. I was at full draw on him, and he was about 8 yards away, and it was early in the season. I wasn't expecting to even hunt there. It was even a little early for black bears, but I had black bears on one bait and went and checked the other one, and this huge grizzly had been there the night before. And when I check a bait and a grizzly's been on it the night before, that's usually like a good time to hunt, because my rule is I got 2 days to get them, sometimes 3, before they move on. And so I mean, it was like 4:00 in the afternoon, and I sat down, and I just couldn't not. And that was the year I was trying to get a grizzly with a stone point, and sure as shit, it was still early in the season, so it got pretty dark. But sure as shit, darkest part of the night, 2:30 in the morning, he came in and walked right under my stand. I could have spit on him, and I was just like, holy shit, this guy is like. Looked like he could lay a yardstick across his back, and he goes under my stand over to the left, and he kind of turned around broadside to smell. I'd set something there when I was checking my camera, and it wasn't there, but he smelled that I had been there. And his nose went right to this stump that I'd set something on, and he was broadside, and I drew a bow, but I couldn't get that long bow I couldn't get far enough around behind myself, or far enough around the tree behind me to shoot him. And he's like 6 yards away, just slam dunk. And he turned and walk towards the bait, and I let the bow down because I was like, he'll give me a chance. And he just kept walking and walked right out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was too dark to shoot him unless he was standing at the bait broadside where, I knew a reference, I knew where to hold and everything. And yeah, maybe it's for the best. Because you hate to wound a huge grizzly bear like that. But
Yeah, I had a similar story too with the big.
That one still hurts a little bit.
I had a similar story too with a big brown bear I was chasing, and I actually chased him for a couple 3 years. But the first year, he came in and he went straight like his ass to me. He went and laid down. He was feeding. He stood up. He turned around and he walked straight back out under my tree, the way he came. And I never, like, I had to shoot him in the ass or shoot him in the top of the head. That was my shot, right? And that was it. That was the only encounter I had with him that year. So
oh man,
it's tricky, man. Like if you can't get them to be in the right spot, they're just, and then they don't come back. It's a tough go, man.
Yeah, and it's funny because you think they're going to come back. That bear, you can read their body language, and that grizzly, I should have known because he smelled that I had just been there, but he wasn't spooked. He wasn't acting spooked. He just turned and walked off, and that was enough. I mean, I had a big one time that I ended up I think it was the same bear. 2 weeks later, I killed it, but I hadn't seen it between that time. So I just climbed in my tree stand, sat down, and heard a big snap. Those grizzly bears are typically loud when they come in, and got ready, and I seen how wide this bear was across the back. I'm like, oh yeah, you're dead. I'm ready to draw. And I pretty much have decided, when the grizzly bear comes in, I'm ready to draw, and I'll shoot him the first chance I get. Cause usually they don't stick around that long. And, they're just antsy, always moving. Anyway, this thing came in, got under a tree, and I had, I think it was I had checked a trail camera. I'd walked near there to check a trail camera, stuck its nose up in the air, turned around and walked away.
Yeah. When I wanted to go back to the kind of the timelines too, we were talking about, I think earlier, but, so I always hear a lot of guys say, oh, it's lots of action. And then, just before kind of the rut's really kicking off, they're like, oh, it just dies. I think like there's a couple different reasons. One is that dandelions are starting to pop, and it's hard to have any bait that competes with dandelions or fresh grass or even poplar buds in the trees, because they'll climb up. They'll lay on them big wide trees on the poplars, and they'll just pick at the buds. So like, yeah, I don't know if you found that. Do you have that happen at all when you're baiting? You find her?
Not too much, but really, mostly out in the bush. Like we don't have not a lot of dandelions. There's some grass will start pop. Usually the hunting gets good after the leaves pop or right as they're starting to pop. We got some poplar and stuff, but not a lot. Most of it's just birch, and birch and cottonwood, and I don't know. I know the hunting typically doesn't start the hunting doesn't start even happening usually till the 20th of May. And it's the same story every year. The season you can put baits out April 15th, and everybody and their brothers putting baits out on April 15th, but snow with sleds and whatever they got to do. And then they spend an entire month checking baits for every couple days, and it's not even time for the bears to really start moving yet. I think the earliest black bear I've ever killed was May 12th, and aside from that, like maybe a couple others before the 20th of May. But most of them, I'll usually get a chance at a good boar like between May 20th and June 1st. But the volume of bears and what they're eating doesn't start really get going until first or second week of June. Middle of June's kind of, at least where I'm at, is like my hot time for grizzly bears. I think the moose calves at that point, it kind of got their feet under them. And just for whatever reason, man, that 15th of June, I think I've killed 3 or 4 grizzly bears within 2 or 3 days of the 15th of June.
Yeah. And it's same for us. Like I said, your guys' winter, I think, hangs on a little longer than ours, right? So
Yeah.
Like I said, I've killed a bear in April, but that was the absolute earliest. And now I think that was even a winter with not much snow. So like this year, I think we're going to have a heavy snowpack in the timber still for quite a while. Like I think we're not going to be seeing bears till, May sometime for sure. At least this year.
Yeah. No, it definitely depends where you're at, and when those bears start moving, it's going to be different, like guys down in Southeast, rainforest type country are starting to get into them in April, starting to see bears on baits in April and whatnot, but it's just too soon up this far north.
Yeah. So what do you?
I think that time when the leaves or just before and when the leaves are starting to pop seems to be pretty good for when activity's really starting to get going.
So what are the what's kind of your go-to for your feed? Like what do you like to feed? And because my whole jam is I like to feed bears as cheap as possible because it can get expensive if you're trying to, and then nothing says I want to break the bank like a fucking sow with 3 cubs because they will clean you out overnight.
Oh yeah, man, and they won't stop. They'll be there every day. And that's some ways I wish it was better up here. Pretty much dog food. Some guys, if you got the patience, will pop popcorn. But they can clean popcorn up even quicker than dog food because there's nothing to it really. It just is volume. But pretty much dog food, and I like to mix like fry grease in with it. I kind of miss the days when they used to use actual lard. Because you'd go to these restaurants or some of these restaurants around town, you'd bring a drum and set it out back behind the restaurant, talk to the manager, whatever, and they'd dump their old fry lard in your drum for you, and it would cool off and solidify, and then you just shovel it in a 5-gallon bucket and mix it with your dog food. Now everyone's on this health bullshit, peanut oil, and which the bears like it, but it's kind of a mess, and it's you got to be a little more cognizant, at least where we're at, of cleaning it up and whatnot. But that's kind of the go-to, is mix a little bit of that fry oil in with the dog food. And I think it helps make it last longer. I could be dreaming, but it seems like the bears don't like super soggy dog food as much, or it ends up getting smashed into the ground when they're wallowing all over it. But having it mixed with a little bit of grease in there at least makes me feel good. I feel like they like it better. And then when, if you run out of bait, those bears will eat the dirt. You'll end up showing up and there'll be nothing but a hole left. So, that's kind of my go-to for feed. I think you need good feed, some kind of feed. If I had access to different, oats or something like that, really cheap, I'm sure that stuff would work just fine too. But, something to keep them there. And then, I'm big on a lure, like, a stink, I use stink baits and a couple different attractors that I like, but, and there's a million of them out there, but I think it's key to have like a good attractor and something to keep them there.
What was the last time we were talking? What the fuck was that shit with the Mere Captain in it? You said the name of it. I can't remember now.
Oh, you were talking, Knockout.
So I Googled it.
Yeah, because you were.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so I Googled it and it's still around. They're still making it. So that's the shit. Like if you want a call lure, that Knockout stuff is the stuff. And I've used it and it's
Knockout. Yeah, Knockout works good. Magnum Martin. I really like. I've started using Martin lure too, just because it's so potent and it lasts a long time. I don't know if you like trap Martin, but this Magnum Martin, it's just a skunk. It's a skunk based paste that just reeks, and then you can smear a glob of it on a tree, and you go back in to rebait or something. You can stir it up on the tree, and it kind of revitalizes the scent. It lasts. You could. Use half a jar. You could use half a jar on your bait site, and it's going to have that place stinking like a big time weed shop or something. That's what gets me driving around town now. The stuff's legal around here, and my first inclination always is like, holy shit, someone left some Magnum Martin laying around here. Someone spilled some trapping lure. Like stuff like Cavan's backbreaker is good too, but it's like that's more of a liquidy trapping lure. That Magnum Martin, and the Knockout's the same shit. It's a paste that lasts really long, and you can stir it up. But yeah, I mean those are good. I like making stink baits with either salmon skins or like pike skins and carcasses, depending on whatever I got, for ice fishing pike and smoking some pike or something, I got carcasses. I'll just put them in a little, 2.5 gallon bucket with some water and leave them outside, in March when it's still cold. And by the time it's time to set baits, they're pretty ripe. Pull the lid off there, man. You're going to be calling some buzzards in.
So kind of like the go-to up here for me and the boys up here is what I do is I took a metal drum and I took a 1-inch nipple and a 1-inch ball valve, and I just took my hole saw and drilled a 1-inch hole in the bottom of the drum. Then I just took my MIG and I welded that threaded nipple in there, and then I screwed the valve on. So then I took that, and it had a removable lid, and I would go to these restaurants with a barrel pump, for pumping diesel fuel or for pumping oil out of a 50-gallon drum. And I just stick it right in there and run the hose up to the barrel, and that's how I'd fill barrels with grease. And
then you crack the ball valve and let them just sit there and
yeah. Or if it was some of the bigger drums, I would do it. So I made up a few of these, a small drum that had a valve that I would just leave on site, and then these big drums, and then I would just fill pails just for mixing with oats. So I kind of just mix it. Oh,
nice. No, that damn, can't read, but you can weld all right, man. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So that's what we do. And oats works good. And oats was always a good option for us up here because it was cheap. I could get 1,200 pounds of oats for like $140. Right from the whatever the hell they're called, the grain buyers or whatever. But now it's went up so much. Frickin' inflation's on everything's crazy high. So I don't know what I'm going to do this year, if I'm going to do the oat thing or what. But, and another option some of the guys do up here is we'll take our drums to the butcher and just leave them with the butcher, and he'll fill our drums with meat scraps. And then, just go pick them up and then just store them in your yard until you want to bait them, right? Which is kind of, they do start to stink when it starts to warm up. So
yeah, how do you find with black bears and that stinky stuff? Because I mean, I've used scrap stuff, stuff that's legal. You can't. They're up in Alaska. You can't. There's things you can't use. But you could use like butcher scraps from beef and stuff like that. It seemed to me that once it taints, those black bears don't really like it. I mean, grizzlies love the rottener the better for them, at least for getting them in. But black bears seem to kind of leave that shit alone. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I found that if you can't feed it out right away, then they kind of shy on it a little bit. Like they're not interested if it gets too rotten. And it's the same with beavers too, right? Like, and it's crazy with the beaver. So I'd make my own beaver cages, and you just make tiny holes, man. Like you could barely fit a beaver head through the hole, and them bears will dig their claws in there. They'll grab a beaver and they'll pull him out, and they'll just like crush his bones. They'll just lay there. I watched them do it, and they'll crush the bones on the beaver, and then they'll just keep inching them out of them holes. And then they'll pull a whole beaver out of them tiny little holes. So.
Jeez. That's one thing I like using too. Yeah, is beaver carcasses.
Yeah, beaver carcasses. I trap my own beaver and stuff, so it's not bad. But, it's the cheaper the better. That's my whole motto, right? Like, who the hell wants to do a spring bear season if it's going to cost $2,000 and feed, right? So
exactly.
I like to try and like even one year I went to the neighbor's. He had a grain dryer. and I offered to shovel his grain. He had to clean it out anyway, right? So I offered. He was drying oats, and at last I offered to go in and clean it. And fuck, I ended up getting about 2,000 pounds of oats out of it. So like,
oh man, yeah, that's killer.
So just shit like that I try to do. Just keep it on the cheap, and then it's more fun, right? You're not really invested too heavily, right? So
well, there's a guy that
go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a guy around in town here that I think during the winter I think he's gotten to know a lot of these bakery places. In the springtime he pops up, $5 a bag for a bag of donuts. He'll just collect the shit throughout the winter and leave it outside. It doesn't go bad, and then make some money, because I think I'm sure he gets the stuff for free. If you're willing, if money's a concern, you're willing to like spend a little bit of effort in the off season and find stuff that's not going to go bad. It's not like there's any secret recipe for bear bait that's going to work. They're chances are whatever you're giving them is a little bit nicer than what they're getting out in the woods.
Mm-hmm. And for me, it's always tonnage too. Like, I don't know if you found this, but if your bait runs out, like you run right dry, I found that the bears leave and it takes them a little while to come back. If there's no feed, like they'll eventually come back through and check it out. But if I want to keep a bear there, like say there's a big boar I'm hunting. So kind of what I was doing is I'd have a drum, one drum with pretty small holes in it with oats in it. Like they could roll it back and forth, and they would just get a mouthful here or there. And then I had other bigger drums with bigger holes that were feed drums. So when I would go in and fill, I'd fill the main feed drums, and then I'd just fill that drum that would hold them. So every time they would come back, there was always something there. Because it seems like if I used to, when I was started baiting years ago, if I had run it out, that was it. They were gone, and it took quite a while for them to come back. So, and then another thing too with that, I ended up, so this is what I was talking about with sows before, when, I don't know if you found this to be true, but I used to put one drum on one tree, and I'd get a mean old sow in there, and she'd just run everybody off, and I would sit there all evening, and I would never see the bear I wanted to kill. He'd never come in because there was a sow chasing everybody away. So I started really I would spread out 4 or 5 different feed drums. So there would be 4 or 5 different bears in there feeding, and they wouldn't be stepping on each other, right? And that really helped for my activities at night, right? It seemed like it kind of worked better. I don't know if you found that to be the same or what.
I haven't really tried that. That's something that might be worth trying. I know the spots I mainly hunt, I don't see a lot. I'll see some, usually older cubs, if sows with cubs come in. But I don't see a lot of them. I think because there's so many, especially because there's so many grizzlies just in the area in general. And really that bait, I try to do most of my black bear hunting before June, because typically once you get a week into June, you'll still have black bears that show up once the grizzlies start getting on it. But man, they get spooky, and it's a lot more sporadic too. I mean, I had a few years ago and it varies year to year, but a few years ago I think I had killed, did I kill 2 big boars off that bait? I killed 1 big boar and 1 nice boar, and I still had 3 big boars on their black bears. Wow. And I had a buddy that I was gonna take hunting. He's a non-resident, so he couldn't shoot a grizzly. Well, 2 days before he got there, sow grizzly with 3 grown cubs showed up and freaking ran every black bear in there off. Which sometimes I've shot a black bear the same night that grizzlies, sometimes they'll use it at the same time, they'll take turns or whatever, but sometimes they won't. Sometimes you'll get just a mean ass old bitch sow grizzly bear that just won't let nobody else play.
Up here, usually we're the same. It's pretty much the same. I know I've been lucky. I've never had a grizz on my bait, but I've had a lot of buddies that have. We got quite a bit of grizzly here. And I got a friend who lives up on high prairie country, and he was showing me pictures of a grizzly and a black bear on his bait, and they were playing together. Like they were just hanging out.
Wow.
Yeah. I never would have thought that unless I seen the pictures, but yeah. So I know, but generally speaking, as a rule, if a grizzly shows up, that's the end of black bear hunting.
Yeah. And it might vary, or at least for a while, like where in some place, even different areas of in Alaska, guys will say, brown bears or grizzly bears, they'll have them keep coming in fairly regular till the bait's gone, or till they quit feeding them. But that's, and I've had last year was kind of like that too. I've had a couple weird years on one of my baits, where it's a little bit more like that. Like the grizzlies seem to be hanging around a little bit more than they normally do. But normally, you get one crack at them and they're gone. And if you miss them, you miss them. You're not going to see them again until next year. But yeah, I don't know. And that's part of the fun of it. You never really know what to expect. And just when you think you got everything totally figured out, they'll throw you a curveball, like that bait, that grizzly bait of mine, mainly in particular, that thing, I'll normally put it out as soon as the ice goes out in the river enough for me to get up and put it in. And usually it's June before the grizzlies really start hitting it. I'll usually have like one or two early customers, enough to check it. But man, 2 years ago, I show up a week later and the thing's totally bone dry, empty, hasn't had food on it for days, and it's just a hole in the ground. And then last year was a weird thing where, I shot 2 black bears on that bait last year and I saw another 3 of them. And before last year, I'd maybe had 2 pictures of black bears on that bait in six years or so. Like black bears just didn't come to that bait. It was only grizzlies. So man, I don't know. It's weird, but that's one thing that's fun about it, I think.
Yeah. I was doing a bait with my cousin one time, and it was a good bait, big bears on it, and this fucking 2 grizzlies showed up, and which is whatever, right? So we cut the feed off, and on one of the pictures, these bears both had ear tags, and the ear tag number was real clear. He was looking at the camera. So we sent that picture to Fish and Wildlife, and they came out and they actually wanted to trap these bears and remove them. They were problem bears that came from over, as the crow flies, probably 200 kilometers away. And they ended up on our bait. So they came out and monkey fucked around. And they were going to try and foothold these bears and whatever. And so I kind of got the backstory on the bears. So them were the cubs to a sow. They had mauled a guy and killed him. And so they went in and shot the sow, and then it took the cubs and relocated them or whatever they did and tagged the cubs. And then the cubs had fell off the radar for 2 years, and here they fucking show up on our bait. So they wanted to trap them. I don't know, move them out of there. But last I heard, and one of the farmers out there had ended up, he was in with his sheep, killing sheep, and they'd shot one of the bears. I don't know. But yeah, grizzlies around there, they're kind of a problem. There's a lot of people, right? So
yeah, I can relocate them to the big berry patch in the sky, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, fucking right.
Where there's endless rows of dumpsters to get in. It's like either the berry patch in the sky or the dumpster in the sky.
It's like when bears are charging guys and they do a warning shot. Like, I don't do fucking warning shots. Like, if a bear's gonna fucking eat you, he's gonna get one between the lookers. I'm not fucking around with that shit.
Yeah, well, it was like that picture the grizzly bear my dad killed. It's like we walk up. I can't remember how I got back to camp, and they motored back to camp, showed up, and this grizzly bear sitting on the bow, on the bow of his boat, walk up, looking at this big old 45 caliber hole right between his eyes. I didn't like the way he looked at me.
Yeah.
That's the warning shot.
That's like the older generation, like my dad and my uncles, man. They do not like keeping bears alive. They fucking hate bears. They just grew up fucking murking bears. That was just what they did.
Yeah.
Like if I can tree any bear, I'll phone my old man. He loves shooting bears, but it's like this, little bears turn into big bears. Big bears eat a lot of crop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here in Alberta, like we have in Alberta, we have like a predatory act. So black bears fall under that, right? So if they're on your place, they're fair game.
Nice. Yeah. It's, and people don't get, I like shooting big grizzly bears. I honestly, where I hunt grizzlies, I wish you could kill 2 or 3 of them a year, because there's a couple sows I would like to get out of there. It's been beneficial for the moose big time, because in that area, what those grizzly bears in the spring are moving down the rivers, up and down, hunting moose calves, because the cows will drop them. They'll drop their calves on the willow bars in those rivers and whatnot, where they can, they try to keep them safe. But you get an old grizzly bear that figures out how to hunt them and where them cows like to hide their calves. They'll wipe them out. I think there was a study up here that showed, they collared some grizzly bears, and man, some of them bears were killing 50 moose and caribou calves in like 2 weeks, something like that. It may not be exactly, but it was ridiculous.
I heard about that study. Didn't they have wasn't there like little cameras on the collars?
There was cameras there was cameras on them. That's how they figured out what they were killing and how much. It was pretty staggering. But I've seen the difference in where. And it's not like I've killed that many. I've killed, I think, like 6 grizzly bears in this area. And I know a few other guys have got it dialed and have been killing some over the past, it's been like 10 years maybe that it's been open. Not quite 10 years. But it's made a difference in the amount of, calves you're seeing on the river in the summer running. And it's also, I don't think there's any less grizzly bears than there was when it started. I've seen 2 or 3 different sows kick out sets of 3 cubs, seen them 2 years in a row where they're, basically grown, ready to get kicked out. Them ones you got to be mean to keep them alive, but you're killing some of these big boars that kill a lot of those cubs, and then more cubs are going to make it, It ends up it doesn't hurt as a whole. It doesn't hurt the ecosystem at all to take, to kind of selectively take even a lot of these grizzly bears, the big boars especially.
Kind of how my mind works with the baiting thing too. A lot of people fucking talk shit about baiting, but when you're feeding, say you're feeding younger boars and sows, you're feeding all the bears. I think it
every
buys
night that they're calves. On your bait, they're not chasing moose calves.
Yeah, 100%. I think if they're on your bait getting an easy meal, I think it just gives them moose calves more and more days to get their legs under them and get going, right? So I do think, even not necessarily if we're killing all the bears, but we're like, just feeding them and keeping them around, I think it's helping save some calves, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think you get an old boar, even an old boar black bear, and he gets wise to calving areas and stuff, man, he gets it figured out. Like, he'll just slaughter fucking calves.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. Like a lot of, old timers I've talked to, seen, and I think, biologists even will tell you that, the black bears are a huge moose calf predator, because they can smell when them cows are about to drop. All they got to do is follow them. They don't have to take a cow down or nothing. They just wait till she drops her calf and scoop it right up, drag it off in the brush. There's areas up here, like one of the areas where we like, sounds a little extreme, ground checking 12 bears in 2 nights, but it's an area where at least when I talked to biologists about it, said there's basically 0 moose calf survival.
Yeah,
because there's so many bears. It's and bears eating other bears, and it's just it's pretty incredible to actually see something like that. It's unbelievable.
Most Fish and Wildlife guys will encourage shooting bears. Fill all your tags. It's actually a big push I got going. I always try to tell guys, because it's just crazy how many guys love hunting. They love hunting moose and they love hunting sheep and they love hunting all this stuff. But when it comes to bears, they're not fucking interested. So I try to amp it up, make it look cool, try to preach and get guys into it. Like, you don't gotta bait. Like, you can do some spot and stock if you can find an area, or if you want to do it, but at least just get out and kill some bears, right? Like,
yeah, no, and I think, because I've heard the million times, I don't have the patience to sit and bait, like, well, you say you like challenging hunts, well, why not be challenged in a way, it's not, I get miffed by the part, like, people think it's got to be hard in a certain way, why can't it be hard in another way? Because, getting good at baiting bears and targeting mature bears and stuff like that, it's a good management tool, but getting good at it is not easy, and it takes time and effort, and I don't know why, I think people are just missing out by thinking, they're too good to sit on a bait or set a bait. It's a lot more. I know I have a lot more time time and energy invested in all the grizzly bears I've killed on bait than probably any single sheep, I've killed. It's just a different kind of hard, it usually takes me a month or more hunting to get a shot at a mature grizzly bear.
Oh yeah. It's
or if you're looking for a cranker black bear, you may never get a shot at a bear you want. It's all part of the game. It's just a different kind of challenge.
Mm-hmm. And I've spotted and stalked them too, and I've killed some, a handful of bears on the ground, and it's fun. It's fun in its own way too, right? Like, it's but the problem, I really found the problem with on the ground. Like, if you just want to go out and shoot a bear, I mean, spot and stalk is maybe that's for you, but if your area allows it, you're kind of a victim of your circumstances, like in terms of where you can hunt. But like, for me, like on the ground, the biggest thing, I think the bears I killed were, for the most part, immature males, right? So it's just, you don't have time to judge them. You just take a look and you're like, well, he looks decent. And like, when you're talking baited black bears, you can really spend some time and be like, yeah, this bear, he's got to be pushing over 19 for sure, right? So,
oh yeah, I mean, because I've been doing it baiting bears for 20 years, and bears are still tough to judge sometimes, I still, sometimes will have bears that trick me, I mean, you guys generally have a little bit better quality of black bears than we have, but we get some big bears, and so, sometimes bears have surprised me being bigger than I thought they were, and sometimes they're a little smaller than I thought they were, and it's not that I don't know what I'm doing, but bears are just generally a difficult thing, and like you said, if you're just doing, spot and stalk or ambush hunting bears, that's an angle that you're just going to get what you get. A lot of times you may not have time, or you probably won't have time a lot of times to really like be selective and get the bears you want to get.
Oh yeah, for sure. So we kind of covered just, bait placement and what you're looking for, right? So basically, any water systems, streams and rivers, anything. I think this, like with that,
like
they cruise them a lot. They're like highways, but I think the scent gets in them creek systems, and it kind of carries, a lot farther than.
Or if you get like the confluence of valleys, if you get different draws coming together, if sometimes, baiting on, and depending on the wind, back to the wind, if you're in real hilly country that doesn't have a lot of, major valleys or waterways, you may, if you put your bait right down in the bottom of a steep draw, the scent may never really get out and spread, or if you put your bait on top of a ridge, stuff may, like I know guys that like baiting kind of halfway up a hill, so you get some downdrafts and some updrafts. You get the scent of your bait spread out. The whole entire premise basically is to set your bait in an area where there's a high likelihood that the wind's going to blow the scent to where the bears are, where they're moving. And you can make that. I sometimes overcomplicate it, but that's basically all you're trying to do.
Yep. And there's lots of tricks to it too, right? So with the fryer grease thing, I'll splash some on the trails going in and out and all over the ground. So when they get it on their pads, they'll track that out, because bears are super sensitive when they smell. So even if a bear tracks it out 400 or 500 yards, another bear will pick that up and they'll come in. So
yeah,
just tricks like that and stuff really help.
Yeah, I had there's a lady up here in Alaska that Batum 907 scents, and I don't know if I kind of doubt there's anything in Canada. She sells anything in Canada, but I had her. She made some. It was making some scents that are like, it's kind of like an oil based crystal you sprinkle around on the ground around your bait, and bears track it off. And I really like sow and heat stuff, so I started making or having her special make me that stuff with estrus sow piss scent, and it seemed to work really well. And so I kind of let she started just making that stuff, calls it stripper glitter. But I don't make any money off it or anything, like I'm totally happy as long as I can get some every year, just some kind of sow and heat scent and some kind of stinky attractor scent. Man, it's I like it, but that follows along the same lines, stuff that they track, or, if you got grease mixed in your food and they get it on their paws, that does definitely help, when them and even if squirrels are running around spreading scent molecules, those bears have a better nose than a deer does, and the more stuff gets spread around, they're going to find it.
I was, so there used to be a bear bait supplier in Alberta. I think it was called Northern Bear Grub or something, maybe. And I used to buy it off of them. So they would get like pallets of like fucking, expired peanut butter, and I ate it. It wasn't expired, but
yeah.
I'd be like putting it out.
Yep.
I'd be like, scoop for me, scoop for you.
Yeah, scoop for you. Yeah.
So I'd feed whatever peanut butter, and I would get licorice and all sorts of shit.
Get hungry sitting in the stand, you could climb down there and
these guys were distributors, so they would sell like bear bait to outfitters. So they would bring in 1,200 pounds at a time of trail mix. So like these outfitters would come in with like fucking flat, like gooseneck trailers, and they would load up like tens of thousands of pounds of like fucking trail mix and fucking all this shit. But anyway, I was a big fan of the peanut butter. What I would do is I just take a nail and I just pound it through the peanut butter on the tree, so the jar would spin, and then bears would just lay there and fuck with them jars for hours and hours. But the squirrels at my bait site were just from the peanut butter were fucking just obese, like these fat little squirrels.
Oh man, yeah, they're not used to that.
I used to. So these squirrels, because I remember I had a pine marten come into my bait one time, and these squirrels were so fat they didn't even leave; they just laid around. This marten was just snatching these fat little squirrels up. Yeah, it was funny.
Oh man, yeah, dude, that's talk about a critter that I'm glad doesn't weigh 65 pounds or something like that. The marten are vicious.
Oh yeah, man, I trapped a lot of them over the years, and same with fishers, man. Like I've been elk hunting before and had fishers run right over my freaking boots, man, chasing rabbits and shit. And fuck yeah, fishers are big. Like,
I mean, yeah, well, fishers just basically like an overgrown marten,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was sitting in a fucking deer stand one time, and this marten, he comes hopping by right under my stand. He crosses into this other patch of timber. Then there's this big commotion. I could hear a squirrel barking, and then he comes back and he's got a squirrel in his mouth, and he comes up, and there's like a forked out birch tree right beside me. He comes up and he goes up in the notch of that tree, and he starts eating that squirrel. I thought that was pretty cool. You get to see that too.
Yeah,
often.
Those things are predators, man. Did you ever seen red squirrels chasing flying squirrels? Do you guys got flying squirrels?
Well, I think we do, but they're not. We don't see them, but I do think they're here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you don't see them here very often either, but you can. They sound different than red squirrels. They have like a real high pitched squeaking. But I've seen them real late at night, like after midnight on bear baits, when I've seen red squirrels, and the red squirrels get so pissed because those flying squirrels, they'll chase them to the top of the tree. Then the flying squirrel just like zips over to another tree. And the red squirrel starts barking and barking, then runs down the tree, runs over to that tree, runs up. Yeah, this flying squirrel just messes with them. And yeah, like we've got bats too, which it's weird. It's almost like, you'll see, and that's the only time I ever really see them is on a bear bait in the woods. And it's like they're like ghosts, it's like, it's dark enough that you're not sure you're actually seeing what you're seeing. Just like stuff randomly, silently swooping around right in front of your face. It's kind of messes you up, but all the stupid shit I've done, dragging bears out, crawling after bears in the brush and after midnight and dragging them out and getting turned around on the alders and whatnot. Oh man, it's fun.
Yeah, it's good. I would love to get it on a camp, like where you said you guys shot 12 bears. Like that'd be a fucking fun bear camp.
Oh, it was a hoot, man. It's exhausting, but so much fun. Good memories. You're up skinning bears till 6:30 every morning. Then you try to get some sleep before the sun gets too high and gets hot. And yeah, no, it's a good time. Running ragged, but man, it's unbelievable.
So we kind of went over bear bait placement. We talked about feed, how you getting in like quads or river boats. I don't know what else we're missing for baits. Just, and the reason like that Tyler uses dog food or I use oats is I'm a big fan of is like, because if a bear can get a big chunk of something, he takes it and leaves. When you have something that they have to lay there and eat, they don't fucking go anywhere. So that's why I'm a big fan of like loose food like that. Because even butcher scraps, if they get a big chunk of a butcher scrap, they'll pack it and they'll fuck off in the timber. Or a beaver. If they ever get a beaver on you, you won't see them the rest of the night. They're gone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's all little things like that. You don't have to be, super picky. Just decent food that you can get cheap. And to give them something to eat, and give them something to eat, and give them some good sense to get them there, and that's half the battle. I mean, I've come across baits before just on accident where it's literally just a bag of dog food with some like strawberry syrup squirted on it or something, and complete waste of time. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket appliance, Ricky, but
it's just water in the fridge.
Yeah, just water under the fridge. Man, got me off track, man. I was rolling too.
You're talking about
it is
dog food with
it does take a few key things. Yeah. No, it's not rocket science, but it does, take a few key things can help you out big time.
And it's just it's a fact of people. Some guys just don't understand that you got to feed them. Like it's okay to bring out one bag of dog food and get a couple bears there, but when it's gone, they're going to probably be gone. That's why I'll have 4-5 drums on one bait, and I'll have drums set up like I'll even have a main feed drum that's like a freaking 8x8 inch square. And I'll just when I roll in, that's like the main drum, and it's strapped about head height to a tree. And I just roll in and I fill it up with whatever I got that day. And then my 2-week barrels that hold food for usually 2 weeks with the small holes, I'll check those. And then I have my 1-week barrels. I have it situated, because sometimes most guys work, right? You can't just run in there all the time and just keep feeding and feeding and feeding. You got to kind of have a plan to stagger your time to try and hold them as best as you can, right? But without fucking break.
And I think the hunting's better if you can. I think the hunting's better in general the less time you can spend screwing around in your bait and spreading scent around,
100%
for big bears.
Yep. And, and there's other things I do too. I've taken old sweaty boxers and threw them up in a tree stand. Just because, if there's a bear hanging around, I want them to kind of get used to my scent. Because if the wind is real shifty, which it is in the springtime, there's no denying it. It gets shifty, right? But that's where if you can have, you're going to have a northwest wind or whatever, what's your guys' predominant wind there?
Typically it's like a northeast, northwest.
Yeah.
Usually.
So you kind of know going into setting up and establishing a bait, like you got to have your downwind side. You know, you're going to try and have your downwind side somewhere where they're not going to peg you as bad, or they're not going to want to show themselves. Like, because a big boar, he ain't just going to walk out in the open. You know, he's going to want to, and if he does, you can put a 20-yard buffer there too, right? So, you know, there's all sorts
and holding still. Yeah. You know, holding still, you know, some of those old bears anyway, you know, they'll sit back there and listen. I'm convinced they'll sit back there and listen for a while before they, you know, and then when the switch flips and they think everything's okay and they'll come in.
Mm-hmm. I had a freaking boar one time I was trying to kill. I called him Old Split Ear. He had that's the only way I knew what he was. He had a big split in his ear, and that fucking bear, there was one spot I could see down, like from my bait, you know, in my tree. And this is why I like tree stands, especially when you're in the alders. A lot of guys want to hunt from the ground, and that's fine. But there's instances where I've killed bears that I would have never seen if I wasn't in a fucking tree. So if you're on the ground in thick timber and thick alders, you're not going to get a shot. If he's going down, he knows you're there and he's going to wind you. You'll never get a shot. He'll come in, wind you, and be gone. Yeah. You won't even know he was there. So that's another reason I really like being up high. But the fuck was I going to say there? I can't remember. But you know, it's
I like hunting black bears on the ground is fun. Grizzlies, tree stand, you can just see so much better. And I quit hunting grizzly bear baits on the ground just because I got sick of being charged. Either they, I had them freaking one the year before you could shoot them. I got on video, had one walk right up. He didn't even know I was there till I said, like, hey, get out of here. Like when he's literally 3 feet off the end of my 375, and that was a big bear. And then, another time I was trying to shoot one with my bow on the ground and had a boar and a sow come in, and the sow walked right by us. I could have reached out and poked her with an arrow, walked right by me to the bait, and the boar was behind us, and he made some noise, and she turned around and saw us and charged us. And she started pumping the brakes and skidded to a stop like 3 feet in front of us and ran off, and it was just a shit show. But you just can't, like with grizzly bears anyway, and black bears too, like a big mature black bear is not going to tolerate it. Some will, but a real wily bear, they will figure out you're there pretty quickly if you're on the ground.
Yep.
It's fun. It's fun, and some bears, you can get away with doing that just fine. But at least grizzly bears, they won't put up with it. They'll charge you and then they'll run away, or they'll just run away, or they won't come in at all. But you can definitely stay undetected better in a tree. And I use those ozonics things, they're a lot of money, and they're like the most gimmicky sounding shit you could ever imagine, but they work.
I've heard that. Yeah. I've heard that a lot of outfitters in Alberta are running them. Just, they say, the big bears you would never see, they're seeing now because of these ozonics. I've never used one, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, you can't just turn them on and forget about it. Like there's kind of you have to keep them pointed downwind. You got to constantly checking the wind and chasing the wind as it's shifting. But I've had wolves come into the bait with downwind, with those things running. I've had several grizzly bears that I know I never would have seen come in, with that I credit to those things. So if it's, you don't need it. You're just going to have to hunt the wind a little better, or not hunt when the wind's wrong. If there's a big wily bear you're after.
So I remember what I was going to say there now. So that split ear bear, I could see down into this little swamp because my bait was right on the edge of water, this little fucking slew there. And he would, because I was playing with the game with him, he had winded me one night, and then I was trying to get on him, and I watched him the one night. There was this big log that kind of laid on the edge of that swamp. He come in, and he just laid there, and he laid there with his head on the log and looked at the bait. He's like, I could see him. He's about 80 yards away, and he just laid there, listened, and watched until about 4 minutes before last shooting light, he got up and started working his way in.
Yeah.
Of course, by the time and then it's too dark, but so he knew I was there. He was just fucking listening, right? So, and then the quad came in and freaking, he knows, they know what's up, right? They're smart. People think that, shooting them is just easy on baits, but it's not.
No, you may get lucky, every now and then, but to consistently get big mature bears, there's something to, there's a method to the madness.
Yep. I never got into some guys will build fences. You see that? And they'll build like a fence out of sticks to kind of keep the bears broadside. I don't know. To me, like
I've tried it.
Yeah.
I've tried it, and I don't know, even not that long ago, build cribbing basically to kind of direct the bears to, I think some, I don't know, and even using barrels, man. Like I think of my main baits, I don't think I'm going to use barrels this year. I didn't use them last year. And cause like grizzly bears rip them off the tree sometimes it just seemed, I don't know. It seems like it spooks some bears a little bit, like they're just a little bit wary of it. And that may not be the case everywhere. But no, I think, stuff like cribbing might spook some bears. They just might not feel comfortable. Like they realize that they're being weaseled into a spot that puts them in a vulnerable position. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think we got it covered pretty good there. Hey, like, I think, I don't think we're missing much, but it's,
I don't think so.
It's a question that I get a lot, and it's just people want to know. People want you to tell them what to do, but I can give you advice on what I know works, and I know like baits on rivers, baits on creeks, that shit works. Thick alders where they feel safe moving in daylight, all that shit. It kind of, works to your favor.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Cool. Well, should we put a pin in this or what?
Yeah, probably should before we get like off on some shit that's going to get one or the other of us in trouble. But no, I'm glad. Yeah, no, it's fun talking to you, man. It's always fun talking to you. And, if you can't tell, I get pretty wound up about murdering bears in the spring. So I'm already like, I went through a period where I didn't really give a shit about shooting black bears. I just wanted to shoot grizzly bears. And now I kind of just want to shoot all of them.
I got a bad case of the Februaries right now where it's like, I want fucking winter to be over. That's that when you have on your podcast, when Temple is on, man, he's my favorite guest. That guy.
Oh, Temple's good shit, man. He's a good dude.
So yeah, it's so if anybody wants to listen to Tyler's podcast, it's Tundra Talk. If you haven't found it already, and he's everything Alaska, so it's a good listen. One of my favorites.
Yeah, no, and yeah, that's awesome to hear. We have a lot of Canadian brethren. I mean, in some ways, I'm sure I've said it on my podcast. In some ways, after I think we're you guys in Alberta and parts of BC have more in common with us up here than we do with lower 48 folks, which
I always say Alaska is Canada. Like
Alaska is Canada. You guys are annexing shit, man.
We should have ended up with Alaska. I don't know how that deal went, but yeah, no, it's good, man. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll see what the feedback is like on this one if everybody enjoys it. But
yeah, no, any time, and I'm full of useless knowledge about stupid stuff. So, no, it's good. It's good to talk to you, and hopefully, so as long as people can get a couple of useful things that they can kind of put to the test and apply, then that's all you can do. Kind of point people in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, man. Well, we'll catch up with you later.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. You can follow us on Instagram at Wilderness Locals. If you want to support the podcast, please check out the gear, articles, and whatever else we're up to on the website at www.wildernesslocals.net.